Listen closely, for the time has come. The kingdom of heaven is within you, if only you choose to see it.
Please, Silas, stop! You're hurting me!
Shut up, Mary! You're coming with me! Get him under the water! Please, no, stop!
Hold him down, you deserve this, filth!
What happens when compassion dies within a person and the dark poison of hatred begins to course through their veins? This story today doesn't come from the pages of an ordinary book, but from the depths of those terrifying, towering mountains of America, where the cold winds still howl. Imagine, on one side, an innocent girl with love for the whole world in her eyes, and on the other, an entire town standing with torches, ready to burn her alive. Tonight you will see what happens when all the boundaries of humanity are broken, when the blood of innocence stains the snow red, and when no answer comes from the heavens. Tonight the sky will split open, the mountains will tremble, and the very power that the world calls Messiah will descend to earth. Blackwood Ridge, nestled among the Appalachian Mountains of West Virginia, was a town largely untouched by the modern world. Giant fir trees surrounded it, and for 6 months of the year, the area was covered in a thick blanket of snow. On that bitterly cold December night, when the temperature had dropped to bone-chilling levels, a small wooden cabin on the hillside, far from the town, glowed with light. This was Mary's home. Mary, a young woman, only 23 years old, possessed a divine radiance on her face that even great saints lacked. She had been preparing for this night for weeks. Inside the house, thousands of handmade clay and beeswax candles burned. When the golden light of the candles fell on the wooden walls, it seemed as if the walls themselves were smiling. That night, Mary was surrounded by those whom the wealthy of the town had cast out. There was old Miller, who had lost everything in the war years ago, and now had no one to care for him. There was Sarah, with a small child in her arms, abandoned by society. Together, they were singing songs of peace in hushed tones. They were there. Mary, stroking the head of a little girl, said, "My child, tonight the star will rise that tells the world that love is the greatest power." The sweet scent of candles had transformed the small cottage into a sanctuary. But at that very moment, in a large hall in the town square, darkness and hatred reigned. There, a powerful man named Silas Vance, who called himself the town's protector, was inciting the people, slamming his gun on the table. His eyes were red with hatred. "Listen, my brothers," Silas's voice boomed. "That girl named Mary is corrupting the land of our ancestors. She is bringing in and settling people whom our traditions have rejected. She worships an outsider Messiah who says that all are equal. Do you want the name of your forefathers to be dragged through the mud? If we don't extinguish the light burning on that hill tonight, tomorrow our existence will be wiped out. Come on. Tonight, we must purify the sacred soil of Blackwood with the blood of these sinners." The crowd, blinded by alcohol and fanaticism, began to cheer. Hundreds of people raised their axes, whips, and burning torches. The sound of hundreds of boots on the snow sounded like a pack of wild animals moving in for the kill. As the crowd advanced towards the hill, the mood of nature suddenly changed. The wind, which had been blowing softly in the night, suddenly stopped. The forest birds, which were usually silent at night, suddenly began to shriek in unison. The wind chimes hanging outside Mary's cottage began to ring loudly without any wind. The old miller looked down through his old telescope. He saw a long line of torches coming up the mountain. he said, trembling. Mary, the devil's army is coming.
We won't survive the night.
They are coming with torches, and their intentions are not good. There was no fear on Mary's face, but rather a strange calm. She closed her eyes and, clasping her hands, said, "Father, let your will be done." Just then, a large white owl landed on the window pane. Its eyes gleamed like gold, and it looked directly into Mary's eyes. It was not a harbinger of death, but of a great transformation to come. It was midnight. Suddenly, a large stone shattered the window and landed at Mary's feet. "Get out! You witch! Get out!"
I know you're in
Silas's
there.
roar
Send her out
pierced
now,
the night's
or
silence.
You all die.
Before Mary could say anything, the mob began throwing burning balls of petrol around the house. The wooden house was instantly engulfed in flames. Mary tried to save the children, but Silas and his thugs broke down the door and dragged Mary out by her hair, pulling her across the icy ground.
Silas, stop! You're
Before
hurting
Mary's
me!
eyes, weeks of her
Shut up,
hard
Mary.
work were turning
Coming
to
with me.
ashes. The fir tree she had lovingly decorated was now ablaze. The old miller was brutally beaten, and Sarah's child was snatched away and thrown onto the snow. The night sky turned blood red from the flames. Silas commanded, "Take them to the town square. Today, they will receive a punishment that will make future generations tremble." Mary and her companions were tied with ropes and dragged across the snow for 2 miles to the town square. There stood an old clock tower. The miller and the other men were chained to it. Then began the horrific spectacle that would make even stones weep. Silas picked up a heavy leather whip. The first crack echoed through the mountains. With each lash, Mary's skin was torn. Her white dress was now soaked in her own blood. But with every blow, Mary didn't scream. Only one word escaped her lips: Messiah. "Where is your Messiah?" Silas laughed and struck her even harder with the whip. The crowd cheered. The children were submerged in ice-cold water in the biting cold. All limits of cruelty had been crossed. The white snow had now completely transformed into a red pool.
Please, no, stop!
Mary's body was
Hold him
giving
down,
out.
you deserve this.
She
filth.
fell to her knees. Her breath was failing. She dipped her trembling hand into her own blood on the ground and made a final mark on the snow. She raised her face to the sky, where the clouds were thundering. There was pain in her voice, but also conviction. "Oh, Father, if this is my end, then I accept it.
God, please
But who
help
will
me!
answer for the blood of
I don't
these
know what else
innocents?
to do.
Come, Lord, I cannot bear this burden any longer."
Please don't leave
As
me
Mary's
here.
head fell, the electricity in the
I'm
entire
begging you,
town
help
went
me.
out in an instant. The hands of the
can't
clock
do this
tower
on my
stopped
own.
at 12.
I give it
The
all
wind
to you.
ceased, and the falling snowflakes
Please,
hung
help me.
motionless in the air. It was as if time itself had been chained. Then a light burst forth from the clouds, a light beyond human comprehension. The light was so intense that Silas and his mob cried out, shielding their eyes. A figure emerged from the center of the sky, a vast, radiant, and immensely powerful being. All the peace and power of the universe emanated from his garments. He was the Messiah himself. His face possessed such majesty that the criminals felt their very souls tremble at the sight of him. There were wounds on his hands and feet, but from these wounds flowed not blood, but divine light. The Messiah descended onto the blood-stained snow. Wherever his feet touched, the snow instantly melted and transformed into fresh, fragrant flowers. The entire atmosphere was filled with an ethereal music. The Messiah approached Mary without speaking. He placed his hand
Your
on
faith
Mary's head.
has made you
In
whole,
an instant,
child.
all of Mary's wounds
Rise.
healed. Her skin became as soft as it had been before. The old miller and Sarah also stood up, completely healed. The Messiah now turned to Silas in the crowd. There was no anger in his eyes, but a deep sorrow. His voice resonated, a voice like a rumbling cloud, yet filled with music. I taught you the lesson of love, but you chose the language of hatred. You have shed the blood of my children in my name. Silas tried to raise his gun, but his hand began to stiffen like stone. He wanted to scream, but his voice froze in his throat. The Messiah raised his hand and said, "Since your hearts have turned to stone, your bodies shall now also be turned to stone." In an instant, the entire crowd that had been wielding whips turned into stone statues in their violent poses. Silas Vance, with the whip in his hand, was frozen forever in that posture. The expression of terror on his face was etched in stone for eternity. The entire square was transformed into a dead city of stone. The Messiah looked at the burnt-down house. At his gesture, the ashes there began to reorganize themselves. The house of mud and wood was transformed into a palace of white, translucent stone and precious metals. A light emanated from it that illuminated the entire mountain. Those who had been killed that night were brought back to life by the Messiah's touch, as if they had awakened from a long and pleasant sleep. The Messiah looked at Mary and smiled. That smile was so beautiful that all of Mary's pain and sorrow vanished in an instant. A bright light flashed, and the Messiah, taking Mary and his companions with him, vanished into that eternal light. The next morning, when the people from the neighboring town arrived, they were astonished by what they saw. Hundreds of stone statues stood in the town square. The terror of that night could still be seen on their faces, and the divine house still stood on the mountaintop, but there was no one there. Even today, if you go to that area of West Virginia, you will find that city of stone. People say that every year, on the same night in December, tears of blood flow from the eyes of those stone statues. This is the punishment for those sinners, that they will stand there forever, weeping over their sins until the day of judgment. Even today, there is no theft in that area. No one hurts anyone's feelings, because when people see those stone statues, they understand that God's justice may be slow, but when it strikes, there is no escape.